91% of people will end this week exactly where they started. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack time, but because they spent 7 days reacting instead of executing. Right now, as you listen to this, millions of people are filling their hours with noise. They answer emails, they attend meetings, they scroll through feeds, they feel exhausted by Friday. And when Sunday night arrives, they look back and realize something devastating. Nothing important actually changed. The project is still unfinished. The goal is still a fantasy. The dream is still waiting. This is not a time management problem. This is a drift problem. And if you do not understand it, you will lose another week, then another month, then another year, until one day you wake up and wonder where your life went. You open this audiobook for a reason. Something inside you knows that your weeks are slipping away. You feel the gap between who you are and who you could be. And that gap is not closed by yearly resolutions or motivational quotes. It is closed by what you finish between Monday and Sunday. Nothing else. Here is the uncomfortable truth that changes everything. Stanford University's Behavioral Research Lab studied over 12,000 professionals across 6 years. They discovered that the average person spends 73% of their week on tasks that create zero meaningful progress toward their stated goals. 73%. That means nearly 3 out of every 4 hours you spend working are essentially wasted motion. You are busy, but you are not effective. You are moving, but you are not advancing. And here is the paradox that traps almost everyone. The busier you feel, the less you actually accomplish. Your brain confuses activity with achievement. It rewards you with a small dopamine hit every time you check something off a list, even if that task moved nothing forward. You end the day feeling productive, but you end the week feeling empty. That is the drift. It is the silent killer of ambition. Let me show you what drifting actually looks like. You wake up Monday morning without a clear target. You check your phone. You respond to whatever feels urgent. You handle other people's priorities because they seem pressing. By noon, you have been reactive for 4 straight hours. By Wednesday, you have forgotten what you even wanted to accomplish this week. By Friday, you justify the lack of progress with excuses. Next week will be different. Next month I will start. Next year, everything changes. But next week is a lie you tell yourself to feel better today. And that lie has been stealing years from your life. The Journal of Applied Psychology published a 15-year longitudinal study in 2022 that revealed something profound. Individuals who set specific weekly goals, not monthly, not yearly, but weekly, were 412% more likely to achieve significant life milestones than those who only set annual goals. 412%. That is not a marginal improvement. That is a completely different trajectory. Why does the weekly time frame work when yearly goals fail? Because a year feels infinite. Your brain cannot process urgency over 12 months. It postpones. It procrastinates. It tells you there is always tomorrow. But a week is different. A week has walls. A week has a deadline that your brain can actually feel. Sunday night comes whether you are ready or not. And that pressure, that healthy constraint, forces action in ways that distant goals never can. Now pay attention to this. Average performers treat each week as a continuation of the last. They wake up Monday and simply react to whatever appears. They have no targets, no priorities, no system. They drift through days hoping something good will happen. They outsource their progress to luck. Elite performers treat each week as a fresh campaign. They know that the outcome of their year depends entirely on what they execute in the next 7 days. They do not hope. They engineer. Before Monday morning begins, they have already decided what must happen. They have eliminated distractions. They have created constraints. And when the week ends, they know exactly whether they won or lost because they defined victory before the battle started. This is the fundamental difference between people who achieve their goals and people who only dream about them. It is not intelligence. It is not talent. It is not connections. It is the simple discipline of treating every week like it matters. Because it does, more than you realize. Here is a number that should disturb you. You have approximately 4,000 weeks in your entire life. If you are 35 years old, you have already spent over 1,800 of them. They are gone. You cannot get them back. And every week you drift is another week subtracted from a finite total. This is not pessimism. This is mathematics. And mathematics does not care about your intentions. The question you must answer right now is simple but brutal. How many more weeks are you willing to waste? How many more Sundays will you look back with regret instead of pride? How many more years will you spend busy but not effective, moving but not advancing, dreaming but not finishing? The drift ends when you decide it ends. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are perfect. Right now, in this moment, with the next 7 days in front of you like a blank canvas waiting for your design. But here is what most people get wrong about weekly goals. They think it is about writing a better to-do list. They think it is about scheduling more efficiently. They think it is about finding some productivity hack that will finally make them disciplined. None of that works. Because the problem was never your list. The problem was never your calendar. The problem is that you have been approaching your weeks without a system that actually changes behavior. And that is exactly what you are about to learn. In the next chapter, you will discover why the 7-day time frame is not arbitrary. There is neuroscience behind it. There is psychology behind it. And when you understand why weekly goals create a specific type of pressure that your brain cannot ignore, you will never approach your time the same way again. You have spent enough weeks drifting. It is time to start engineering. Chapter 2: The Weekly Advantage. Why 7 days changes everything. Your brain is lying to you about time. It has been lying to you your entire life. And until you understand exactly how this deception works, you will keep setting goals you never achieve. Neuroscientists at MIT's Picower Institute for Learning and Memory conducted a groundbreaking study in 2021 that revealed something most people never consider. The human brain processes time horizons in fundamentally different ways. When you set a goal 12 months away, your prefrontal cortex treats it as abstract information. It files that goal in the same category as hypothetical scenarios and distant possibilities. Your brain acknowledges the goal exists, but it does not mobilize resources to pursue it. There is no urgency signal, no activation of the neural pathways that drive sustained action. But when you set a goal 7 days away, everything changes. Your brain's threat detection system engages. The amygdala recognizes a real deadline approaching. Dopamine pathways activate because the reward is close enough to feel tangible. Suddenly, your nervous system treats this goal as immediate and necessary rather than distant and optional. This is not motivation. This is neurobiology. And it explains why 92% of New Year's resolutions fail, while people who set weekly targets achieve dramatically more. The yearly goal feels safe. The weekly goal feels urgent. Your brain responds to urgency. It ignores safety. Here is the practical translation of this science. When you say you want to write a book this year, your brain hears a vague intention with no deadline pressure. When you say you want to write 2,000 words by Sunday night, your brain hears a specific command with an imminent consequence. The first statement creates wishful thinking. The second creates behavioral momentum. Same goal, completely different neurological response. Now let me show you why the 7-day time frame is not arbitrary. It is the perfect balance between two psychological forces that most people never reconcile. The first force is urgency. You need enough pressure to override procrastination. Daily goals create too much pressure and lead to burnout. Monthly goals create too little pressure and lead to drift. But weekly goals hit the sweet spot. 7 days is short enough that your brain cannot dismiss the deadline, yet long enough to accomplish something meaningful. You can complete a real project in a week. You can make genuine progress on a major goal. You can produce tangible results that compound over time. The second force is recovery. You need enough breathing room to sustain effort across months and years. Weekly cycles include natural reset points. Every Sunday becomes a fresh start. Every Monday is a new campaign. This rhythm prevents the exhaustion that destroys long-term consistency. You sprint for 7 days, then you assess, adjust, and sprint again. It is sustainable intensity rather than unsustainable obsession. Harvard Business School's Organizational Behavior Unit analyzed performance data from over 8,000 employees across 47 companies in 2023. They found that workers who operated on weekly goal cycles outperformed those on monthly cycles by 31% in measurable output. But here is the part that surprised the researchers. The weekly group also reported 23% higher job satisfaction and 14% lower burnout rates. They accomplished more and felt better doing it. This is the weekly advantage. It is not just about productivity. It is about building a sustainable relationship with achievement itself. Pay attention to this next distinction because it separates those who understand this principle from those who only read about it. Average performers set yearly goals and hope weekly progress happens automatically. They create a vision board in January and expect motivation to carry them through December. When February arrives and enthusiasm fades, they have no system to fall back on. They drift until the next burst of inspiration, which might come in March or might come never. Their progress depends entirely on how they feel, and feelings are unreliable partners for long-term achievement. Elite performers reverse the equation entirely. They set weekly goals and let yearly achievements happen automatically. They know that if they win enough weeks, the year takes care of itself. They do not rely on motivation because they have removed motivation from the equation. Every 7 days has a clear target. Every Sunday has a planning ritual. Every Monday has predetermined priorities. Their progress depends on systems, not feelings. And systems work even when feelings fail. This is not a subtle difference. This is the difference between hoping your life improves and engineering your life to improve. One approach leaves your future to chance. The other approach makes your future inevitable. Here is a number that will change how you think about time. 52. That is how many weeks exist in a single year. 52 opportunities to set a target, execute a plan, and create measurable progress. 52 chances to prove to yourself that you are someone who finishes what they start. If you won just 40 of those weeks, just 40 out of 52, you would accomplish more in 1 year than most people accomplish in 5. But most people do not win 40 weeks. Most people do not win 20 weeks. Most people drift through all 52, hoping that someday the conditions will be right to finally take action. They are waiting for motivation that never sustains itself. They are waiting for clarity that never fully arrives. They are waiting for the perfect moment that does not exist. The weekly advantage eliminates waiting. It creates artificial deadlines that your brain treats as real. It builds momentum through repeated small wins. It transforms vague annual intentions into concrete 7-day missions. And it does all of this while remaining sustainable enough to maintain for years. Consider what happens when you stack weekly wins. 4 weeks of progress creates a month of momentum. 13 weeks creates a quarter of compound results. 52 weeks creates a year of transformation that seems impossible to outside observers, but feels inevitable to you because you watched it happen 1 week at a time. This is how lasting change actually works. Not through sudden breakthroughs or dramatic revelations. Through consistent weekly execution that accumulates faster than anyone expects. But knowing the weekly advantage is not enough. You must implement it correctly. And implementation begins with a single ritual that separates those who win their weeks from those who merely survive them. That ritual happens on Sunday. It takes less than 30 minutes. And it determines whether your upcoming week will be a victory or another 7 days of drift. In the next chapter, you will learn the exact Sunday strategy that elite performers use to engineer their weeks before Monday morning begins. You will discover why the strength of your week is decided before the week even starts. And you will receive a specific protocol that you can implement immediately. The weekly advantage is real. Now it is time to learn how to capture it. Chapter 3. The Sunday Strategy. Win your week before Monday begins. The most successful people you admire do not wake up Monday morning wondering what to do. They wake up Monday morning already knowing. And that single difference creates a performance gap so massive that it explains why some people accomplish in 1 month what others cannot accomplish in 1 year. Here is what nobody tells you about willpower. You do not have an unlimited supply. Every decision you make throughout the day withdraws from a finite account. By the time you have chosen what to eat for breakfast, responded to emails, handled unexpected problems, and navigated social interactions, your decision-making capacity is nearly depleted. This is not weakness. This is neuroscience. Researchers call it decision fatigue, and it explains why your best intentions collapse by Wednesday afternoon. A landmark study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences examined over 1,000 judicial decisions made by experienced judges throughout single workdays. The results were disturbing. Judges granted parole to 65% of prisoners seen in early morning sessions. But by late afternoon, after hundreds of decisions had drained their cognitive resources, that approval rate dropped to nearly 0%. Same judges, same criteria, completely different outcomes based entirely on when the decision occurred. Your weekly goals face the same invisible enemy. If you wait until Monday morning to decide what matters, you are making critical choices with a brain already burdened by 1,000 smaller decisions. You will choose easier tasks over important ones. You will default to reactive work instead of proactive progress. You will drift because drifting requires no decision at all. The Sunday strategy eliminates this problem entirely. It moves your most important decisions to a time when your cognitive resources are fully restored. Sunday evening, after rest, after recovery, your brain operates at peak capacity. This is when you should be designing your week, not Monday morning when the chaos has already begun. Let me give you the exact protocol that separates elite performers from everyone else. The Sunday strategy consists of 4 phases that take less than 30 minutes combined. Do not skip any of them. Each phase builds on the previous one, and together they create a week that runs on systems instead of willpower. Phase 1 is the clearing. Before you plan forward, you must close the past. Take 5 minutes to review the week that just ended. What did you commit to accomplish? What actually happened? Do not judge yourself during this phase. Simply observe the gap between intention and execution. Write down the honest answers. This clarity prevents you from repeating the same mistakes and carrying unfinished business into a new week. Phase 2 is the targeting. Now identify your 3 most important outcomes for the upcoming week. Not 5, not 10, 3. These are not tasks. These are outcomes. There is a critical difference. A task is something you do. An outcome is something you achieve. Writing for 2 hours is a task. Completing the first chapter is an outcome. Attending meetings is a task. Securing the contract is an outcome. Your brain responds differently to outcomes because they have clear finish lines. You know when you have one. Why only 3 targets? Because research from the University of London's Institute of Cognitive Neuroscience confirms that the human brain cannot effectively pursue more than 3 major objectives simultaneously. When you add a 4th priority, all 4 suffer. When you add a 5th, you achieve almost nothing. Constraints create focus. Unlimited options create paralysis. Choose 3 and protect them ruthlessly. Phase 3 is the blocking. Take your 3 weekly outcomes and assign them specific time blocks on specific days. This is non-negotiable. If an outcome does not have protected time on your calendar, it does not actually exist. It is just a wish. Block your most important work during your highest energy hours. For most people, this means mornings before interruptions accumulate. Treat these blocks like medical appointments that cannot be rescheduled, because in a very real sense, they are appointments with your future self. Phase 4 is the preparing. For each major time block, decide in advance exactly what you will do when you sit down. Not vaguely. Specifically, if your outcome is completing the first chapter, your preparation might be opening the document, reviewing the outline, and writing the opening paragraph. These micro-decisions made on Sunday eliminate friction on Monday. You do not waste energy figuring out where to start. You simply execute what has already been decided. Now observe how radically this differs from what most people do. Average performers wake up Monday with vague intentions. They hope to make progress this week, but have not defined what progress means. They check email first because it requires no decision. They attend meetings because other people scheduled them. They react to whatever feels urgent because urgency provides direction their planning failed to provide. By Friday, they have been busy for 40 hours but moved nothing important forward. They comfort themselves by saying next week will be different, but next week follows the same pattern because the pattern was never interrupted. Elite performers wake up Monday with predetermined outcomes. They know exactly what victory looks like for the next 7 days because they defined it on Sunday. They ignore email until their first deep work block is complete. They decline meetings that conflict with their protected time. They feel less busy but accomplish more because every action serves a purpose they consciously chose. By Friday, they have achieved specific measurable results. And Sunday, they repeat the process, compounding gains week after week. This is not about working harder. Elite performers often work fewer hours than their drifting counterparts. This is about working with intention. It is about making decisions when your brain is sharp so you can execute when your brain is tired. It is about winning the week before the week begins. Here is the part most people resist. The Sunday strategy requires you to sacrifice 30 minutes of leisure time. It asks you to think about work when you would rather relax. This feels uncomfortable at first, but consider the alternative. Without those 30 minutes of planning, you will lose hours of execution. You will spend Monday deciding what to do instead of doing it. You will spend Wednesday recovering from poor choices made under cognitive load. You will spend Friday wondering why another week disappeared. 30 minutes of discomfort on Sunday purchases 5 days of clarity and momentum. That is not a sacrifice. That is the best trade you will ever make. There is one more element that makes the Sunday strategy powerful, and most people miss it entirely. When you plan your week in advance, you create a psychological contract with yourself. You make a promise, and how you handle that promise determines something far more important than weekly productivity. It determines your identity. Every time you honor your Sunday commitments, you prove to yourself that you are someone who keeps their word. Every time you abandon them, you prove the opposite. This is not about the individual tasks. This is about who you are becoming through the pattern of your choices. In the next chapter, you will learn why limiting your focus to just 2 or 3 weekly goals is not a restriction, but a multiplication of your power. You will discover the neuroscience behind why less actually creates more. And you will understand why the most productive people in the world deliberately ignore almost everything. Your week is won or lost on Sunday night. Now you know how to win it. Chapter 4. The Rule of 3. Why less goals mean more progress. The most productive people in the world ignore almost everything. This sounds wrong. It feels wrong. Every instinct tells you that more effort on more goals should produce more results. But the data proves exactly the opposite. And until you accept this counterintuitive truth, you will keep diluting your power across targets you will never hit. Here is the paradox that traps ambitious people. The more goals you pursue simultaneously, the fewer goals you actually achieve. This is not a motivational slogan. This is mathematics backed by 4 decades of cognitive research. And it explains why your longest to-do lists produce your shortest result lists. Psychologists at Stanford University's Communication Between Humans and Interactive Media Lab conducted a series of experiments that changed how we understand human attention. They discovered that when subjects attempted to focus on more than 3 significant objectives, performance on all objectives declined dramatically. Not just on the 4th objective, on all of them. Adding priorities does not distribute effort. It destroys effort. Your brain cannot parallel process complex goals the way a computer runs multiple programs. Every addition creates interference that degrades everything. Let me make this concrete. Imagine you have 10 important goals for the week. You feel ambitious. You feel motivated. You write them all down and commit to crushing it. But here is what actually happens inside your brain. Every time you work on goal number 1, part of your cognitive resources remain allocated to goals 2 through 10. Your subconscious is scanning for those other priorities, monitoring their status, generating anxiety about their neglect. You are never fully present with any single task because 9 other tasks are demanding background attention. Now imagine you have 3 important goals for the week. When you work on goal number 1, your brain can allocate nearly complete resources to that single outcome. Goals 2 and 3 exist, but they have designated time blocks. Your subconscious relaxes because the system accounts for everything. You achieve deeper focus, higher quality output, and faster completion. Then you move to goal 2 with the same concentrated power. This is not about working less. This is about focusing more. The total energy expenditure might be identical, but the results are incomparable. Google's internal performance research division, known as People Operations, analyzed data from over 15,000 employees across 7 years to understand what separated their highest performers from average contributors. The findings surprised everyone. Top performers did not work more hours. They did not have higher IQs. They did not possess rare talents unavailable to others. What distinguished them was relentless prioritization. They consistently identified the 2 or 3 highest leverage activities and protected those activities from everything else. They said no more often than they said yes. They deliberately ignored good opportunities to focus on great ones. Here is the phrase that should become your weekly mantra. If everything is important, nothing is important. When you treat 10 goals as equally critical, your brain treats all 10 as equally optional. There is no hierarchy. There is no urgency. There is no clarity about where to direct your best energy. You spread yourself thin and wonder why nothing substantial gets done. But when you select 3 goals and declare them supreme over everything else, your brain responds differently. It creates a hierarchy. It assigns resources. It builds motivation around clear targets with defined finish lines. You stop asking what should I do now because the answer was already decided. You simply execute the next action toward one of your 3 chosen outcomes. Now let me show you how to select the right 3. Not all goals are equal. Some goals create ripple effects that improve multiple areas of your life. Other goals consume energy without generating momentum. The rule of 3 only works if you choose goals that actually matter. Here is the filter that separates transformative goals from busy work. Ask yourself one question about each potential weekly goal. If I accomplish this and nothing else, will I feel the week was successful? If the answer is no, the goal is not worthy of your top 3. It might be necessary, it might be urgent, but it is not important enough to claim one of your 3 precious slots. Delegate it, defer it, or delete it. Protect your focus for outcomes that genuinely move your life forward. The second filter is even more clarifying. Ask yourself which goal, if ignored, would create the most significant negative consequence by Sunday night. This question reveals your true priorities stripped of wishful thinking. The goal that would hurt most to miss is usually the goal that matters most to hit. It should claim your first slot and your best hours. The third filter addresses the trap of endless maintenance tasks. Ask yourself which goal, if completed, would make next week easier or unnecessary. This question identifies goals with compound returns. Finishing a system that automates future work is worth more than completing 10 tasks that will simply regenerate tomorrow. Prioritize goals that reduce future workload over goals that merely address current workload. Observe how different this approach is from how most people plan. Average performers list everything they could possibly do and hope to complete as much as possible. Their weekly plans look like inventories of wishes rather than strategies for execution. They start Monday feeling overwhelmed before a single task is touched. They jump between priorities based on mood, urgency, or whoever interrupts them most aggressively. By Wednesday, their plan has collapsed into reactive chaos. By Friday, they cannot even remember what they originally intended to accomplish. Elite performers list the 3 outcomes that would make this week a victory and ignore virtually everything else. Their weekly plans look like military objectives rather than shopping lists. They start Monday with absolute clarity about where to direct their first 4 hours. They protect their priority blocks against interruptions because they understand that a single hour of deep focus outperforms 4 hours of scattered attention. By Friday, they have completed their 3 targets and created momentum that carries into the following week. This is the rule of 3 in action. It is not about doing less for the sake of doing less. It is about doing less so you can achieve more. It is about accepting that your attention is a finite resource and investing that resource where it generates the highest return. Here is a practical technique that reinforces this rule. Every Sunday, when you identify your 3 weekly outcomes, write them on a single index card. Just 3 lines. Nothing else. Keep that card visible throughout the week. On your desk, next to your computer, in your pocket. Every time you feel pulled toward tasks outside those 3 outcomes, look at the card. Ask yourself whether the distraction serves your stated priorities. If it does not, return to what matters. This simple physical artifact creates surprising psychological power. It externalizes your commitments. It makes your priorities tangible rather than abstract. It provides a constant reference point when decision fatigue clouds your judgment. And it builds integrity by holding you accountable to promises you made when your thinking was clear. Most people resist the rule of 3 because it requires sacrifice. Choosing 3 means not choosing 7. It means admitting that some goals must wait. It means accepting that you cannot have everything immediately. This feels like loss, but it is actually liberation. When you stop pretending you can pursue unlimited objectives, you gain the power to actually achieve your most important ones. The next chapter reveals another sacrifice that most people refuse to make, and that refusal costs them everything. You will discover why announcing your goals feels good but destroys your chances of achieving them. You will learn the neuroscience behind a phenomenon called premature satisfaction. And you will understand why the most successful executors work in silence, while everyone else performs for applause. 3 goals, 7 days, complete focus. This is how progress actually happens. Chapter 5, The Silence Protocol. Execute in quiet, let results speak. Every time you announce a goal before achieving it, you steal motivation from your future self. This is not metaphor. This is neuroscience. And it explains why the people who talk most about their plans accomplish the least. Here is what happens inside your brain when you tell someone about your intentions. You describe your goal. Their eyes light up. They offer encouragement. They tell you how impressed they are. They treat you as if you have already succeeded. And in that moment, your brain makes a catastrophic error. It registers social approval for an achievement that does not yet exist. Dopamine floods your reward circuits. You feel the satisfaction of accomplishment without having accomplished anything. Researchers at New York University's psychology department documented this phenomenon in a series of experiments that should disturb anyone with unfulfilled ambitions. They found that subjects who announced their goals to others showed significantly reduced follow-through compared to those who kept goals private. The effect was not small. Public declaration decreased completion rates by an average of 43%. The more social recognition received for the intention, the less likely the intention became reality. This is called premature satisfaction, and it is silently destroying your weekly goals. Think about the last time you shared a major plan with friends or posted an intention on social media. Remember how good it felt. Remember the likes, the comments, the validation. Now think about what happened next. Did you execute with relentless focus? Or did something strange occur? Did your urgency fade? Did your motivation soften? Did that goal quietly drift from priority to afterthought? You were not lazy. You were neurologically hijacked. Your brain already collected the reward. It had no reason to endure the effort required for actual achievement. Why struggle through discomfort when the dopamine has already been deposited? This is the trap that catches ambitious people over and over. They confuse talking about success with working toward success. They mistake public commitment for private discipline. They believe that announcing goals creates accountability, but the research proves the opposite. Announcement creates satisfaction, and satisfaction kills hunger. Now here is the protocol that elite performers use to protect their goals from premature satisfaction. The silence protocol has one core principle. Never announce a goal until it is complete. Not to friends, not to family, not to social media, not to anyone whose approval might trigger a dopamine response. Your goals exist only between you and your calendar until results make them undeniable. This feels counterintuitive. Popular advice tells you to share goals for accountability. Motivational speakers encourage public commitment. Social media culture rewards declarations of intent. But consider who benefits from this advice. The people encouraging you to announce feel good about supporting you. The platforms profit from your engagement. The only person who loses is you when premature satisfaction drains your execution fuel. True accountability does not come from announcing intentions. True accountability comes from tracking results. There is a profound difference. When you announce an intention, you receive credit for something you have not done. When you track results, you confront the gap between your promises and your performance. One inflates your ego, the other informs your improvement. Choose wisely. The silence protocol includes a second layer that amplifies its power. Not only do you avoid announcing goals, but you actively resist the urge to discuss your progress until completion. This is harder than it sounds. When you are making genuine progress on something meaningful, the temptation to share becomes intense. You want recognition. You want encouragement. You want someone to acknowledge your effort. But every time you share mid-process, you leak motivational energy. You convert internal drive into external validation. You trade the fuel you need for completion for a small hit of social approval. The exchange rate is terrible. A moment of recognition costs hours of momentum. Here is a practical technique to implement the silence protocol. When you feel the urge to announce a goal or share your progress, write it down instead. Create a private document titled Silence Log. Every time you want to tell someone about your plans, tell the document instead. Date each entry. Describe what you wanted to share and why. Then close the document and return to work. This technique accomplishes two things. First, it gives you an outlet for the announcement urge without triggering premature satisfaction. You have expressed the thought. It is out of your head, but no social reward follows, so your motivation remains intact. Second, the silence log creates a record of your journey that becomes meaningful only after achievement. When you finally complete the goal, you can review every moment you chose silence over satisfaction. That review itself becomes a reward far more valuable than any premature recognition. Observe how this separates two completely different approaches to achievement. Average performers treat goals as social content. They announce New Year's resolutions. They post workout selfies before transformations occur. They share business ideas before building businesses. They collect encouragement as a substitute for accomplishment. Their social feeds overflow with intentions. Their actual lives overflow with unfulfilled promises. Every announcement felt good in the moment, but cost them the energy needed for execution. Elite performers treat goals as private operations. They work in silence while others perform for applause. They understand that attention spent on announcement is attention stolen from achievement. They find social recognition uncomfortable before completion because they know what it costs. When they finally reveal accomplishments, the results speak with authority that intentions never could. Their social feeds show finished work. Their actual lives show systematic progress. This difference is not about personality. It is not about being introverted or humble. It is about understanding how your brain responds to recognition and deliberately managing that response to serve your goals rather than sabotage them. There is one exception to the silence protocol that deserves mention. Accountability partners who track results rather than intentions can enhance execution rather than diminish it. The key distinction is what they hold you accountable for. If your accountability partner celebrates your intentions, they are hurting you. If they only acknowledge completed outcomes, they are helping you. Choose partners who ask, "What did you finish this week?" rather than "What are you planning to do?" The question they ask determines whether they support your success or enable your satisfaction addiction. Here is a challenge that will test whether you truly understand this principle. For the next 4 weeks, tell no one about your weekly goals. Not your spouse, not your best friend, not your social media followers. Plan in private. Execute in quiet. Let your results make noise when they are ready. Notice how different it feels to work without the pressure of public expectation and without the relief valve of premature sharing. Notice how your motivation sustains itself when no external dopamine interferes. The silence protocol is not about secrecy for its own sake. It is about protecting your most valuable psychological resource from a world designed to harvest it. Every app, every platform, every social norm encourages you to share before you finish. They profit from your engagement. You pay with your execution. In the next chapter, you will confront another force that sabotages weekly goals. You will discover why waiting to feel motivated guarantees you will never act. You will learn the neuroscience behind a principle that reverses everything you believe about inspiration. And you will understand why motion must always precede emotion. Work in silence. Let success make the noise. Chapter 6. Motion precedes emotion. act before you feel ready. You have been waiting for motivation your entire life, and that wait has cost you years of progress you will never recover. Here is the truth that changes everything. Motivation does not create action. Action creates motivation. You have the equation backwards, and that reversal is why your weekly goals keep failing. This is not philosophy. This is neurobiology. And once you understand the science behind it, you will never wait to feel ready again. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania's Positive Psychology Center conducted a 10-year study tracking the relationship between emotional states and productive behavior. What they discovered contradicted everything popular culture teaches about motivation. In 91% of recorded instances, the feeling of motivation appeared after the initiation of action, not before. People did not feel motivated and then start working. They started working and then felt motivated. The emotion followed the motion. Think about this carefully. Almost every time you have felt genuinely motivated in your life, you were already doing something. The motivation arrived mid-task, not before it. You sat down to write feeling resistant, and somewhere around the third paragraph, energy appeared. You started exercising feeling exhausted, and by the 10th minute, momentum built. You began the difficult conversation dreading every word, and midway through, clarity emerged. Motivation is not a prerequisite for action. Motivation is a consequence of action, and waiting for it to arrive before you start is like waiting to feel full before you eat. The logic is inverted. The sequence is wrong, and the cost is paralysis disguised as patience. Here is why your brain tricks you into waiting. Your nervous system is designed to conserve energy. From an evolutionary perspective, unnecessary exertion threatens survival. So your brain developed sophisticated mechanisms to discourage action until absolutely necessary. That voice telling you to wait until you feel ready is not wisdom. It is a primitive survival script running in a modern context where it no longer serves you. When you feel unmotivated, your brain is not sending you accurate information about your capacity. It is sending you a request to conserve resources. But you are not a hunter-gatherer rationing energy for an uncertain food supply. You are a modern human with goals that require consistent effort regardless of emotional weather. Treating your brain's conservation request as a command rather than a suggestion is the core error that keeps people stuck. Now let me give you the protocol that overrides this error. The 2-minute ignition works by exploiting a quirk in how your brain processes commitment. Your resistance is highest before you begin. Every fiber of procrastination activates to prevent the initial action. But once action starts, a different neurological process engages. Your brain shifts from evaluation mode to execution mode. Resistance drops. Momentum builds. Motivation follows. The protocol is simple. When you do not feel like working on your weekly goal, commit to exactly 2 minutes of effort. Not 30 minutes. Not an hour. 2 minutes. This commitment is small enough that your brain cannot justify resistance. 2 minutes is nothing. Anyone can endure 2 minutes. So you begin. Here is what happens next. Once you pass the 2-minute mark, continuing feels easier than stopping. You have already invested. You have already overcome the initial friction. Your brain has already transitioned into execution mode. 90% of the time, those 2 minutes become 20 minutes, then an hour, then a completed work session. The motivation you were waiting for arrives, but only because you stopped waiting. This is not a trick. This is how your neurology actually functions. The commitment threshold matters more than the duration. Getting started matters more than planning to start. Motion generates the emotion you thought you needed before motion. There is a deeper principle beneath this technique that separates people who achieve from people who intend. Average performers believe they need to feel a certain way before they can act effectively. They wait for inspiration before writing. They wait for energy before exercising. They wait for confidence before having difficult conversations. Their entire productivity depends on emotional conditions they cannot control. When conditions align, they perform. When conditions fail, they postpone. Their weeks become hostage to internal weather patterns that shift without warning or reason. Elite performers divorce action from emotion entirely. They understand that waiting for feelings guarantees inconsistency, because feelings are inherently inconsistent. So they build systems that operate regardless of emotional state. They schedule their most important work and execute the schedule whether they feel inspired or drained. They treat their commitments as non-negotiable appointments that exist independent of mood. Their weeks produce consistent results because consistency was designed into the structure, not left to chance. This does not mean elite performers feel motivated all the time. They feel resistance just like everyone else. The difference is their response to resistance. Average performers interpret resistance as a signal to stop. Elite performers interpret resistance as a signal that the work matters. They have learned that meaningful goals always generate friction. The presence of resistance confirms they are pushing towards something significant rather than drifting towards something comfortable. Here is a reframe that makes this principle stick. Stop asking yourself whether you feel like doing the work. Start asking yourself whether you feel like being the person who did not do the work. Project forward to Sunday night. Imagine looking back at a week where you honored your commitments despite not feeling ready. Now imagine looking back at a week where you waited for motivation that never came. Which version of yourself do you want to meet at the end of 7 days? This projection technique works because it shifts the emotional calculation. In the present moment, skipping the work feels like relief. But when you project to the future, skipping the work feels like regret. You are trading momentary comfort for lasting disappointment. Once you see the trade clearly, the choice becomes obvious. There is one more layer to this principle that most people miss. When you act without waiting for motivation, you train your brain to follow commands rather than feelings. Each repetition strengthens this pattern. Over time, the gap between decision and execution shrinks. You become someone who does what they decide to do regardless of emotional interference. This is not discipline as white-knuckle willpower. This is discipline as neurological habit. The action pathway becomes automatic because you practiced it until automation occurred. Consider what this means for your weekly goals. If you implement the 2-minute ignition every time resistance appears, you will complete more tasks in 1 month than most people complete in 6. Not because you have more motivation than they do, because you stopped requiring motivation as a prerequisite. The practical application is immediate. Tomorrow morning, when your alarm sounds and your body begs for more sleep, apply the 2-minute ignition. Commit to 2 minutes of vertical posture. Just 2 minutes of being awake and upright. Watch what happens next. When you sit down to work on your first weekly goal and every distraction calls your name, commit to 2 minutes of focused attention. Just 2 minutes of engagement with the task. Watch the resistance dissolve. Motion precedes emotion. Action generates motivation. Waiting is the enemy of achievement. In the next chapter, you will discover what happens when you break promises to yourself. You will learn how missed weekly goals do not just cost you progress, but erode something far more valuable. And you will understand why protecting your self-trust might be the most important thing you ever do. Stop waiting. Start moving. Let motivation catch up. Chapter 7. The Identity Trap. How Missing Goals Destroys Self-Trust. Every promise you break to yourself leaves a scar on your identity. You cannot see these scars. You cannot touch them, but they accumulate silently, eroding the foundation of everything you want to become. And the most dangerous part is this. You inflict these wounds so gradually that you never notice the bleeding until the damage is severe. Here is what nobody explains about missed weekly goals. The cost is not just the lost progress. The cost is what happens to your relationship with yourself. When you set a target on Sunday and abandon it by Wednesday, you teach your brain a devastating lesson. Your word means nothing. Your commitments are negotiable. Your plans are wishes rather than commands. Each repetition of this pattern deepens the lesson until it becomes your default operating system. Psychologists call this self-trust, and research from the University of California's Department of Behavioral Science shows it functions exactly like trust between two people. When someone repeatedly breaks promises to you, your trust in them erodes. Eventually, you stop believing anything they say. You dismiss their commitments before they even fail because history has taught you their word is worthless. The same dynamic operates internally. When you repeatedly break promises to yourself, your self-trust erodes. Eventually, you stop believing your own intentions. You set goals knowing you probably will not achieve them. You make plans with a hidden asterisk that says unless I do not feel like it. You have trained yourself to expect your own failure, because failure is what you have consistently delivered. This is the identity trap. It is not about one missed goal. It is about the cumulative effect of missed goals on who you believe yourself to be. And once you believe you are someone who does not follow through, that belief becomes self-fulfilling. Why try hard when you know you will quit? Why commit fully when you know commitment means nothing? The identity trap turns temporary failures into permanent limitations. Here is the number that should alarm you. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology tracked over 3,000 participants across 18 months, measuring the relationship between goal completion rates and self-efficacy scores. They found that individuals who completed less than 40% of their stated weekly goals experienced a 27% decline in self-efficacy over the study period. Their belief in their own capability dropped by more than a quarter simply because they repeatedly failed to do what they said they would do. But here is the finding that matters more. Participants who completed more than 70% of their weekly goals experienced a 34% increase in self-efficacy over the same period. Their belief in themselves grew by more than a third. Same amount of time, opposite trajectories. The only variable was whether they kept or broke their promises to themselves. This means your weekly goals are not just productivity tools. They are identity construction mechanisms. Every week you hit your targets. You build evidence that you are someone who follows through. Every week you miss your targets. You build evidence that you are someone who quits. The evidence accumulates. The identity solidifies. And eventually, you become what you repeatedly prove yourself to be. Now let me show you how to escape the identity trap and rebuild self-trust even if years of broken promises have damaged it. The first principle is radical honesty about your current pattern. You cannot fix what you refuse to see. Take an inventory of the last 12 weeks. How many commitments did you make to yourself? How many did you keep? Do not estimate. Do not guess. Actually count. If the completion rate is below 50%, you are actively destroying your self-trust with every passing week. This is not judgment. This is diagnosis. An accurate diagnosis precedes effective treatment. The second principle is commitment calibration. Most people set goals that sound impressive rather than goals they will actually complete. They want to feel ambitious when they write the goal. But ambition on Sunday means nothing if Wednesday brings abandonment. It is far better to set modest goals and hit them than to set grand goals and miss them. Each completion deposits trust in your internal account. Each miss withdraws it. The size of the goal matters less than the consistency of completion. Here is a practical technique. For the next 4 weeks, cut your typical weekly goals in half. If you normally set 6 goals, set 3. If you normally aim for 10 hours of focused work, aim for 5. Make the targets so achievable that missing them would require deliberate sabotage. Then hit every single one. No exceptions. No negotiations. Complete what you committed to complete. This feels uncomfortable for ambitious people. It seems like settling. It seems like lowering standards. But you are not lowering standards permanently. You are rebuilding a foundation that has been cracked by chronic overcommitment. You are retraining your brain to believe your own word again. Once self-trust is restored, you can gradually increase the difficulty. But restoration must come first. The third principle is identity-based framing. Stop thinking about goals as things you are trying to do. Start thinking about them as evidence of who you are. There is a profound psychological difference between these two frames. When your goal is to exercise 3 times this week, missing a session means failing a task. It feels bad, but recoverable. When your identity is someone who honors physical commitments, missing a session means violating who you are. It feels like self-betrayal. The stakes are higher. The motivation is deeper. The follow-through is stronger. Observe how this reframe changes behavior in practice. Average performers set goals as external targets disconnected from identity. They say, I want to write more this week. When resistance appears, they negotiate with the goal. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe less than planned. Maybe next week instead. The goal is separate from who they are, so abandoning it feels like a strategic adjustment rather than a character failure. They drift through weeks making reasonable-sounding excuses that slowly dismantle their self-trust. Elite performers set goals as identity evidence. They say, "I am a writer," and writers write regardless of how they feel. When resistance appears, they recognize it as a test of identity rather than a calculation of convenience. Abandoning the goal would mean becoming someone else, someone who does not follow through. That identity cost is higher than any temporary discomfort. So they execute, not because they feel like it, because that is who they are. This is not semantic games. This is a fundamental restructuring of how you relate to your commitments. When goals are tasks, they compete with comfort and often lose. When goals are identity, they define who you are and comfort becomes irrelevant. Here is the question that makes this real. At the end of this week, what do you want to be true about yourself? Not what do you want to accomplish. What do you want to be true about the kind of person you are? If you want to be someone who keeps their word, then keeping your word this week is non-negotiable. If you want to be someone who finishes what they start, then finishing what you started is mandatory. The goal is not the point. The goal is merely the mechanism through which you prove or disprove your identity. Every Sunday when you set your weekly targets, you are making a promise to yourself. Every Friday when you review your results, you discover whether you are someone who keeps promises or someone who breaks them. There is no middle ground. There is no partial credit. You either honored your word or you did not. And your brain is keeping score even when you pretend it is not. In the next chapter, you will learn how to build systems that work even when you fail. You will discover why relying on motivation guarantees inconsistency and what to construct in its place. And you will understand the architecture of a week that produces results regardless of how you feel. Protect your self-trust. It is the foundation of everything. Chapter 8: Systems over Motivation. Building a week that works anyway. The most dangerous lie in personal development is that you need to feel motivated to succeed. This lie has destroyed more goals than laziness ever could. Because when you build your week around motivation, you build it on sand. And sand shifts. Sand collapses. Sand buries everything you tried to construct. Here is the truth that liberates. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. This principle, articulated by behavioral researchers across decades of study, explains why people with identical ambitions achieve radically different results. Goals are fantasies until systems make them inevitable. And systems work precisely because they do not require motivation to function. A study from the European Journal of Social Psychology tracked 196 participants attempting to build new habits over 12 weeks. The researchers measured two variables. First, how motivated participants felt on any given day. Second, whether they completed their target behavior. The correlation between motivation and completion was shockingly weak in the early weeks. But by week 8, something remarkable happened. Participants who had built systematic triggers and routines completed their behaviors 91% of the time, regardless of motivation levels. The system had replaced the need for willpower. This is what separates sustainable achievement from temporary bursts of productivity. Motivation fluctuates daily based on sleep, stress, blood sugar, social interactions, and dozens of variables you cannot control. Building your week around motivation means building your week around chaos. But systems remain constant. A well-designed system executes itself whether you feel inspired or depleted. It removes you from the equation and lets structure do the heavy lifting. Now let me show you exactly how to build a weekly system that works even when you do not. The first component is environmental architecture. Your surroundings shape your behavior far more than your intentions do. If you want to execute your weekly goals consistently, you must design environments that make execution easier than avoidance. This is not about willpower. This is about friction reduction. Consider your primary workspace. When you sit down Monday morning to work on your first weekly target, what do you see? If you see your phone within arm's reach, you have designed an environment for distraction. If you see the specific tools needed for your priority task already prepared, you have designed an environment for execution. The difference seems small. The impact is enormous. Remove every object from your workspace that does not serve your weekly goals. Place your phone in another room during focus blocks. Close every browser tab unrelated to your current task. Make the desired behavior require zero preparation and the undesired behavior require maximum effort. This asymmetry of friction determines outcomes far more reliably than motivation ever could. The second component is temporal anchoring. Your weekly goals need specific homes in time. Floating intentions that exist somewhere in the week, but nowhere in particular will drift until Friday arrives and nothing has happened. Anchoring transforms vague intentions into concrete appointments. Here's the technique. Take each of your 3 weekly goals and assign it to a specific day and specific time block. Not just the day, the exact hours. Write it in your calendar as a non-negotiable appointment. When that time arrives, you do not decide whether to work on the goal. The decision was already made on Sunday. You simply execute what was scheduled. This eliminates the daily negotiation that drains willpower and invites procrastination. Average performers wake up each morning and ask themselves, what should I work on today? That question opens a door to rationalization, delay, and substitution of easy tasks for important ones. Elite performers wake up and consult their calendar. The calendar answers the question before it can be asked. No negotiation required. No motivation needed. Just execution of predetermined commitments. The third component is default behaviors. These are automatic responses you pre-program for predictable obstacles. Every week contains moments that threaten your goals. Energy crashes, unexpected interruptions, emotional turbulence. If you wait until these moments arrive to decide how to respond, you will respond poorly. Depleted willpower makes terrible decisions. Instead, create if-then protocols in advance. If I feel resistance when my focus block begins, then I will commit to 2 minutes of work and reassess. If I get interrupted during deep work, then I will note the interruption and return within 60 seconds. If I feel too tired to execute, then I will do a reduced version of the task rather than skip entirely. These pre-decided responses remove real-time decision-making from moments when your decision-making capacity is compromised. The fourth component is progress visibility. What gets measured gets managed, but more importantly, what gets seen gets sustained. Your weekly system needs visual feedback that shows you exactly where you stand at any moment. Create a simple tracking mechanism for your 3 weekly goals. This can be a paper checklist on your desk, a whiteboard near your workspace, or a digital tracker you check daily. The format matters less than the visibility. You should be able to glance at your progress without opening apps or searching for documents. When progress is visible, momentum becomes tangible. When momentum is tangible, motivation becomes unnecessary. Now observe how these 4 components combine to create a week that functions independently of how you feel. Average performers start each day with good intentions, but no structure. They wake up hoping to make progress, but have not designed their environment for focus. They know what they want to accomplish, but have not anchored those goals to specific time blocks. They encounter obstacles and make real-time decisions with whatever willpower remains. They have no visual feedback showing daily progress or weekly trajectory. By Friday, their good intentions have produced scattered results at best and complete failure at worst. They blame their lack of motivation without recognizing they never had a system. Elite performers start each day inside a structure designed for execution. They wake up into an environment already optimized for their priority work. They consult their calendar and see exactly what the next 4 hours require. They encounter obstacles and execute pre-decided responses without depleting willpower. They glance at their progress tracker and see exactly where they stand relative to their weekly targets. By Friday, their system has produced consistent results regardless of daily motivation fluctuations. They do not rely on feeling good because they built something that works anyway. This is the architecture of a week that moves your life forward without requiring heroic effort. You design it once, you refine it over time, and then you let it carry you toward your goals while others wait for inspiration that may never arrive. Here is a practical challenge that will prove this principle. Next week, implement all 4 system components for your single, most important goal. Architect your environment to reduce friction. Anchor the goal to 3 specific time blocks. Create 3 if-then protocols for predictable obstacles. Establish a visible tracking mechanism you will see daily. Then execute the week and observe what happens. You will discover something profound. The days you felt motivated and the days you felt resistant will produce nearly identical results. Because the system does not care how you feel. It only cares that you show up at the appointed time in the prepared environment with pre-decided responses ready. That is enough. That has always been enough. Motivation is a bonus. Systems are the baseline. Build the baseline first and let motivation amplify what already works. In the next chapter, you will learn the practice that closes every successful week. You will discover how honest self-assessment without excuses creates compounding improvement. And you will understand why the mirror test might be the most important 60 seconds of your entire week. Stop chasing motivation. Start building systems. Chapter 9. The Mirror Test. Honest review without excuses. There is a moment every week that most people avoid. It lasts less than 60 seconds. It requires no special skills. It costs nothing, and it separates those who improve continuously from those who repeat the same failures for years. This moment is the mirror test, and your willingness to face it determines everything. The mirror test is simple. Sunday evening, before you plan your next week, you look at your 3 goals from the week that just ended. You ask one question and one question only. Did I do what I said I would do? Not did I try. Not did circumstances interfere. Not did I make progress. Did I do what I said I would do? Yes or no? There is no partial credit. There is no grading curve. There is only truth. This sounds brutal because it is brutal, and that brutality is precisely what makes it effective. Research from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University examined the difference between people who achieved long-term goals and those who abandoned them. They found that the highest predictor of sustained achievement was not intelligence, resources, or initial motivation. It was the practice of honest self-assessment without rationalization. Individuals who regularly confronted the gap between their intentions and their actions, without softening that gap with excuses, improved at nearly 3 times the rate of those who allowed themselves comfortable explanations for failure. The excuse is the enemy of improvement. Every time you explain away a missed goal, you rob yourself of the lesson that failure was trying to teach. You had a reason. The reason felt valid, but the reason changed nothing about the result. You did not do what you said you would do. That is the only fact that matters. And until you face that fact without decoration, you cannot change the pattern that produced it. Here is what most people do instead. They finish a week having missed their targets and immediately begin constructing a narrative. Work was unusually demanding. An emergency appeared. They were not feeling well. Someone needed their help. The goal was unrealistic to begin with. Each explanation sounds reasonable. Each explanation protects the ego from the discomfort of failure. And each explanation guarantees the same failure will repeat because the actual cause was never examined. The mirror test forbids this escape. When you stand before your results and ask, "Did I do what I said I would do?" you are not allowed to answer with explanations. You are only allowed to answer yes or no. If the answer is no, you sit with that no. You feel the weight of a broken promise to yourself. You do not rush past it toward next week's optimistic plans. You let it register, because that discomfort is the only force strong enough to change your behavior. Now let me give you the exact protocol for conducting the mirror test effectively. Step 1 happens Sunday evening before any planning begins. Open your record of last week's 3 goals. These should be written somewhere specific, whether your calendar, your index card, or your planning document. Read each goal aloud, not silently, aloud. There is psychological power in hearing your own commitments spoken in your own voice. Step 2 is the binary assessment. For each goal, answer only yes or no. Did you complete it fully as defined? Yes or no. Do not say mostly. Do not say almost. Do not say I made good progress. These soft answers are escape hatches your ego will use to avoid accountability. Close them. Yes or no. Write the answer next to each goal. Step 3 is the uncomfortable pause. If any answer is no, do not immediately move to analysis or planning. Sit with the no for at least 30 seconds. Feel what it feels like to have broken a promise to yourself. This is not punishment. This is calibration. You are training your nervous system to associate broken commitments with discomfort rather than rationalization. Over time, this association becomes powerful enough to influence real-time decisions during the week. Step 4 is root cause identification. Now, and only now, you may examine why the goal was missed. But the examination follows strict rules. You are not allowed to cite external circumstances as the cause. External circumstances exist every week. They are not explanations. They are conditions everyone faces. The only valid root causes are decisions you made or failed to make. Did you protect your time blocks? Did you start when scheduled? Did you use your if-then protocols? Did you remove distractions from your environment? Somewhere in your decisions lies the actual cause. Find it. Step 5 is the single adjustment. Based on the root cause, identify one specific change you will make next week to prevent the same failure. Not 5 changes. 1. Write it down. This adjustment becomes part of next week's system. You have transformed failure into improvement rather than repetition. Observe how this differs from how most people end their weeks. Average performers finish Sunday without any formal review. They have a vague sense of how the week went, but no precise accounting. They remember what they accomplished, but conveniently forget what they abandoned. If pressed, they could generate explanations for every missed goal that sound entirely reasonable. They enter the new week with optimism untethered from evidence, believing next week will be different without changing anything that would make it different. This pattern continues for months and years while they wonder why progress remains elusive. Elite performers finish Sunday with a completed mirror test. They know exactly which goals they hit and which they missed. They have felt the discomfort of every no without rushing past it. They have identified root causes within their own decisions rather than external circumstances. They have extracted one specific adjustment from each failure. They enter the new week with optimism grounded in systematic improvement. Each week builds on the lessons of the previous week. Progress compounds because learning compounds. Here is a truth that the mirror test will eventually teach you. Most failures share the same small set of root causes. You will discover that you consistently underestimate how long tasks take, or you consistently fail to protect your morning focus blocks, or you consistently let low-priority interruptions derail high-priority work. The specific pattern varies by person, but everyone has patterns. The mirror test makes your patterns visible. And visibility is the prerequisite for change. There is one more element that amplifies the mirror test's power. Keep a written record of every weekly review. Date each entry. Note your 3 goals, your yes or no for each, your root causes for any misses, and your single adjustment. Over months, this record becomes invaluable. You can see which adjustments worked and which failed. You can identify recurring root causes that require deeper intervention. You can measure your completion rate over time and watch it improve. The data tells a story that memory alone cannot preserve. Some people resist the mirror test because it feels harsh. They prefer gentler approaches that celebrate effort regardless of outcome. But celebrating effort while ignoring outcome is precisely how people stay stuck. Effort without result is just motion, and motion without progress is the definition of drifting. The mirror test insists on results because results are the only evidence that your system is working. This does not mean you should punish yourself for missed goals. Self-punishment is counterproductive. The mirror test is not about shame. It is about clarity. There is a difference between honestly acknowledging a broken promise and emotionally flagellating yourself for being a failure. The first leads to improvement. The second leads to avoidance of future mirror tests because they feel too painful. In the final chapter, you will receive the complete weekly momentum protocol assembled into a single actionable system. You will see how every principle connects to create a week that moves your life forward automatically. And you will face the choice that determines whether this audiobook changes anything or becomes another idea you consumed and forgot. The mirror does not lie. Face it anyway. Chapter 10. The 7-Day Transformation. Your protocol starts now. 1 year from today, you will look back at this moment. You will either see it as the week everything changed or the week you consumed another idea and did nothing with it. The difference between those two futures is not knowledge. You now have the knowledge. The difference is whether you act on it before the next 7 days begin. Most people who listen to audiobooks like this one feel inspired for approximately 48 hours. They intend to start next week. Then life resumes its usual patterns. The inspiration fades, and nothing changes. 6 months later, they cannot even remember the main concepts. The audiobook joins a graveyard of good ideas that never became lived reality. You have a choice right now. Breaking that pattern requires one thing only: action before this week ends. Not perfect action, just enough action to create momentum that carries you into next Sunday's planning session. Here is the complete weekly momentum protocol assembled into a single system. Pillar 1 is the Sunday strategy. Every Sunday evening, you invest 30 minutes designing the week ahead. You begin with the clearing, reviewing what happened in the week just ended. Then targeting, identifying exactly 3 outcomes that would make the coming week a victory. You continue with blocking, assigning each outcome to specific time blocks on specific days. You finish with preparing, deciding in advance exactly what you will do when each time block begins. Pillar 2 is the rule of 3. You never pursue more than 3 significant weekly outcomes simultaneously. Your brain cannot effectively focus on more than 3 major objectives without degrading performance on all of them. You choose goals using 3 filters. Which goal, if accomplished alone, would make this week successful? Which goal, if ignored, would create the most significant negative consequence? Which goal, if completed, would make future weeks easier? Pillar 3 is the silence protocol. You never announce goals before achieving them. You protect your motivation from the premature satisfaction that comes from social recognition of intentions. When you feel the urge to tell someone about your plans, you write it in your silence log instead. You let results speak when they are ready. Pillar 4 is motion before emotion. You never wait to feel motivated before acting. When resistance appears, you deploy the 2-minute ignition, committing to just 2 minutes of effort to overcome initial friction. You divorce your actions from your feelings because feelings are unreliable and actions are controllable. Pillar 5 is the mirror test. Every Sunday, before planning the new week, you ask, did I do what I said I would do for each of your 3 goals? You answer only yes or no with no partial credit. You sit with any no long enough to feel its weight. You identify root causes within your own decisions. You extract one specific adjustment to prevent the same failure from recurring. These 5 pillars work together as an integrated system. The Sunday strategy creates clarity. The rule of 3 creates focus. The silence protocol protects energy. Motion before emotion ensures execution. The mirror test drives improvement. Remove any pillar and the structure weakens. Implement all 5 and you become someone who moves their life forward week after week. Now observe the contrast between 2 futures. Average performers will close this audiobook and think about implementing these ideas someday. They will not designate a specific Sunday to begin. When next week arrives, they will face the usual chaos with the usual reactive approach. By March, they will have forgotten this audiobook existed. Another year of drift. Another year of intentions without results. Elite performers will act within 24 hours. They will schedule their first Sunday strategy session tonight. They will identify their 3 goals for the coming week before going to sleep. Each week will build on the previous week. By March, they will have completed over 30 weekly cycles. Their December will be unrecognizable compared to their January. A year of engineered progress. A year of promises kept. Which person will you be? The answer is not given in words. It is given in action over the next 48 hours. Here is your immediate assignment. Before you do anything else after this audiobook ends, complete 3 steps. First, open your calendar and block 30 minutes next Sunday evening for your first Sunday strategy session. Second, write down the 5 pillars somewhere you will see them daily. Third, identify your 3 goals for this coming week and write them down right now. These 3 steps take less than 10 minutes. If you cannot invest 10 minutes to begin transforming your weeks, you have already answered what kind of year lies ahead. 52 weeks from now, what will be different about your life? Time passes whether you use it or waste it. The only variable you control is how many of those weeks you win and how many you drift through hoping something changes. The weekly momentum protocol gives you a system to win more weeks than you lose. It does not promise perfection. It simply asks you to plan before you execute. Focus on what matters, protect your energy, act before you feel ready, and honestly assess your results. Stop letting weeks disappear without progress. Stop confusing movement with advancement. Stop waiting for the perfect moment that will never arrive. Your protocol starts now. The next 7 days are waiting. The only question left is what you will do with them.